the Kings of the East. This is part 2. Hopefully you watched part 1 where we went into the order of the Kings of the East. Now we're going to get more into some background, other things in the prophecy to tell us who the Kings of the East are. Okay, we saw before how the Kings of the East could be seen in the order of the horse riders. Okay, we saw the horse riders coming from the throne. We saw they from the order of the 4 horns around the golden altar. And we, in this video, are going to talk about the thing that's in your face every year that you can't see. So you might ask me, when we do videos like this, Leland, just tell us what it is. Why do you speak to us in like parables? And why do you read the Bible and symbolism that we can't understand? Well, most likely the details in this video you will not understand as well, unfortunately. But we'll explain it to you simply like this. In Revelation, we see the 6th bowl, and when the 6th bowl is poured out, the great river Euphrates is dried, and we have another video on the backup channel to show you that, in fact, the country of Turkey has dammed up the Euphrates River, and it's dry as early as Syria. Okay, it has been dried for a number of years down in Iraq, but now it's a big problem. So it's a major sign for us because it says in the prophecy, the Euphrates River be dried to make a way for the kings of the East. All right, so who's the kings of the East? Hopefully in the previous video you understood all the symbolism and prophecy related to them. Now we're going to focus on the prophecy related to specific locations and things relating to who they are. Now, you might just say, well, Leland, speak to me plainly. Who are the kings of the East? And why is it you say every year it's in your face? Okay, every year you make graven images and you call it a nativity. And in that, there's 3 guys in that. Those are the kings of the East. So those are the kings of the East, guys. There's not 3 of them. Okay, that's just a Christian tradition. But what I want you to see is, how does this come into be? How is it that when Christ is born, okay, the only ones led by the Spirit of God to see where he was, that were looking. Okay, you might say, well, the shepherds found him. Okay, the shepherds found him, but they weren't looking. The angels just appeared, and the shepherds were not looking. All right, the only ones that were looking that found him was Anna, Simeon, and the Magi. So that should get your attention. So the only ones that were looking for the Messiah, that actually found him and held him as a baby and blessed him, was Anna, Simeon, and the Magi. Now, who are the Magi? Nobody knew about the Magi. Now, all of a sudden, we have the Magi on the scene. So we have to do some history to go back in time to find out, who are these people? Who is the Magi? How is it that they were led by the Most High to find the Messiah? Okay? You didn't see rabbis. You didn't see, you didn't see anybody there, okay, finding him, except for Anna and Simeon when Mary went to the temple, okay, and the Magi finding him later on, 2 years old, okay, in the house, okay. The wise men were not in the manger. Most of what you're doing is Christian tradition, but within that Christian tradition is exactly in your face what Revelation 16 verse 12 is talking about. Okay? So this is a fascinating subject. We are not going to focus so much on the Magi at Christ's first coming. We want to set that as a precedence for something you can rationalize in your mind what happened. So this was very interesting to the early church, and I'll have a link in the description field on one of the Bible scholars. He had done some research on the ancient church history. I'll post the link in the description field for a video on who are the Magi. There were early church writers that found writings of the Magi themselves and their trip to Jerusalem. Okay, fascinating story. But we're not so much going to get into that as we are going to get into the prophecy. All right, there we are in Matthew chapter 2. We see this Magi. Okay? Now, there's a particular order that is a heavenly council, guys, that happens every time the Most High does something significant, right? Okay. Whenever he does something significant, there's certain orders and certain numbers that take place. So now, let's go to Acts chapter 2. We go to Acts chapter 2. Most of you are Pentecostals, and I'm going to tell you things which you have never seen. When the Holy Spirit came, there was how many were gathered in the upper room, first and foremost? About 120. Okay, about 120. That is a council. All right? Now, in that council, they are waiting for the promise of the Father, and the Holy Spirit was poured out. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as a rushing mighty wind, and filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared to them cloven tongues of fire, and sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. They began to speak in other tongues. Okay? Now, and when this was noised abroad, now let's keep going. Let's go through it. That was verse 2, verse 3, verse 4, verse 5. And there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men. Okay? So that's who the kings of the East are. They're devout men. All right? They're dwelling at Jerusalem, devout men out of every nation under heaven. And when it was noised abroad, the multitude came together and were confounded, because everyone heard them speak in their own language. Okay, so what do you have? You have 120 people assemble. You have the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. You have the sound of a great rushing mighty wind. You have the cloven tongues. They are sealed. They begin to speak in other tongues. And the people that heard them speaking in tongues could understand what they're saying. And they were amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not these that speak Galileans? How we hear every man in our own tongue. Okay, who is saying this? Devout ones. Okay, these are devout ones. This word is also attributed to Simeon. Simeon was a righteous man and devout, looking for the Messiah. And he found him, he held him. Okay, and here you have dwelling at Jerusalem at the Feast of Pentecost. The people are there. They're hearing them in their own language. Okay, now what is the first language that's mentioned, the first few languages? Okay, we hear every man in our own tongue. Okay, so the people, that were devout, coming from the nations, they're in Jerusalem for the feast. Okay, Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and the dwellers of Mesopotamia. All right, now what we have here is basically the area of Iran, bordering into Iraq, areas around Babylon. So this is on either side or around the area of the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. That's where the people are coming from. Okay, so you can see in the prophecy, when the bowl is poured out, it dries the great river Euphrates. Okay, so here you can see the people living around on either side, but also on the east of the Euphrates. The Medes, the Elamites, the dwellers of Mesopotamia, in Judea. Okay, and then it lists some other places. All right, these are other places. These are other places. But we're going to focus on the ones east in this video. Okay, we can read some of the other ones. Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia in Egypt, and parts of Libya, Cyrene, in Rome, Jews and proselytes, Cretes and Arabians. Okay, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of God. And they were amazed, and they were doubt one to another. What does this mean? Okay, so it's apparent that these people, specifically from the Medes and the Elamites, is what we're going to focus on. Okay, because now we're going to do some history. We're going to have to go back and figure out, how are these people hearing the works of God in their own language in Jerusalem, devout ones? Why did the Most High point these places out? Why did he speak to them in their language? Well, they're the kings of the East, guys. So this is Pentecost. All right, so of course, this is the months after Christ's death, burial, and resurrection in Passover. Okay, so here we can see these important words, the devout ones. Okay, they were devout. These are righteous, like Simeon. Okay, Simeon was Christ was born. Anna was Christ was born. The Magi. What did the Magi bring? They bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Okay, to the king. They brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh to the king to honor and reverence him. Now, how did these come about? How is it that the kings of the east are there on Pentecost? That's who it is, guys. They're there. Kings of the east were there. All right. Now, what we have to do is we have to go way back in time. Let's go back in time. Let's find out the beginning of this through the prophet Daniel. Now, when we go to the prophet Daniel, you'll see that, and basically what happens, you know the story. Daniel chapter 2, Daniel was part of the king's magicians and astrologers and sorcerers, okay? So this is Daniel chapter 2, verse 2. And the king commanded to call when Nebuchadnezzar had the dream, the king commanded to call all the magicians and astrologers and sorcerers, the Chaldeans, to show the king his dream. And they stood before him, okay? So this is Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And so this is what Magi means. Okay, Magi is like these guys. All right? And so Daniel interprets a dream. Now, when he interprets a dream, then in Daniel 2, verse 48, then the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many great gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, the chief of the governors, and over all the wise men of Babylon. Okay, so Daniel thus becomes the leader and the ruler over the wise men. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon, but Daniel sat in the gate of the king. Okay, so Daniel didn't want to be over the province. He gave that to others, but he remained the leader of the wise men. Okay, now this is Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, this is in Babylon. This is the Babylonian Empire. Daniel being promoted to one of the highest orders, and he becomes to be this leader over the wise men. Okay, so when we say Magi, okay, that's a Greek word, and that Greek word, if we were to look at it in the Greek Old Testament called the Septuagint, we will find the Magi in certain verses like this one, okay, where we're reading in verse 2 of the ones that were around the king. So this is what? The Euphrates. That's where Babylon is, all right? So we thus have Daniel teaching the astrologers prophecy. That's when it starts, guys. That's the start of the kings of the East. All right? This is the start of it with Daniel. Now, we also see Daniel, his great significance. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, which appeared to me at the first. Okay, this is Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. And I saw in the vision, it came to pass when I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. Okay, now this is an area, this is a province of Elam. So remember we saw the Elamites at Pentecost. Okay, so Elam, this is the place where Daniel is. Okay, so Daniel is here, and at this palace in the province of Elam, I saw in the vision by the river Ulai. All right, so here we have Daniel in the palace, more than likely while he's stationed there. This is the reign of Babylon, Belshazzar, it's the reign of Babylon. He's stationed, okay, in Elam, okay, which is the kings of the east, which is east of the Euphrates, okay? So he is here, and remember, he was placed over the wise men all the way back with Nebuchadnezzar, we could see in chapter 2, all right? So now, in chapter 8, he is still the leader of these wise men. He is still teaching them prophecy. He still has a school, if you were. Okay, so this is Daniel's school of prophecy in a particular place in the palace at Shushan. Okay, now these are symbolic things in nature But what I'm trying to say is everything that happened before in the history and the prophecy has to happen again for us to see who the kings of the east are in Revelation 16. So the school and the beginning of this goes back to Daniel. When Daniel was in Babylon, Daniel thus continues the school in Shushan the palace. Okay? All right. Shushan the palace in the province of Elam. All right. Daniel 8, we have the Babylonian, okay, empire, which thus concludes, and we go into what? The Persian Empire. Okay? Now, in the Persian Empire, now this is dealing a little bit with types and shadows, but it's a real thing. So, historically, this actually happened. Yes, the book of Esther. And now it came to pass in the days of Ahasuerus, this Ahasuerus, which reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. 127. Okay? See the order? 120. Book of Acts, 120. Okay? In those days, Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom, which was in Shushan the palace. Okay? Now, what province is Shushan the palace in? It's in Elam, isn't it? Okay. So by this time, Daniel's school is still going. The Magi are still continuing in the understanding of Daniel's prophecy. And the king, now Esther 1 verse 13, the king said to the wise men, which knew the times, for such is the king's manner, to know the law and the judgment. And next to him were, and we mentioned the 7 names in the previous video, okay, the 7 princes of Persia and Media. Okay, so this is the various names that they have. Persia, the Medes or Media, and Elam. Okay, essentially these are the kings of Persia. And here they're called the princes. The 7 princes of Persia, Media, which saw the king's face. And they were first in the kingdom. All right, now this of course happened historically. And it happens again because the whole book of Esther is a prophecy that is understood in the book of Revelation. And here we see the 7 princes of Persia and Media as the kings of the east. Okay? And we're not saying that there's a particular number, like 4 or 7, yet these are the highest ranking officials in the government that choose the king, that instruct him in the matters. Okay? So when an issue came up, you can see the king went right to his council, went right to who? The Magi. Okay, so there you can see in Esther, the king, all right, expressing these Magi. Now, in Daniel's prophecy, they were still maintaining the understanding of Daniel's prophecy at this time. Okay, so they still understand Daniel. They still have the information to look for the coming Messiah. Now, what they have is they have the books of Daniel, of course, and they have other books and scrolls of the scriptures in their possession. Now, it was the belief of the early Christians. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, guys. I just want you to know it. I'll put additional information in a note in this video. Okay, the early church believed in the writings from the Magi that they ascertained, the understanding that they had from Numbers chapter 24, the prophecy of Balaam of the Messiah. That the Magi knew that Numbers chapter 28 would correspond to the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 11. And you can, in fact, see that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. It's a fascinating study. But essentially what they did is they said, okay, this star of Jacob, okay, they related that star. They ended up actually seeing the star that leads them to the house where Christ was, okay? So they saw that star in Numbers chapter 24. Now they knew that the time was right based on the book of Daniel chapter 11. And so they are watching for certain things to happen. If this happened, then prophecy be fulfilled, then the Messiah must come, okay? So they will also have the understanding of the Messiah precisely, that they would know, okay, this is the time to look for him, okay? Now, the Jews should have been doing that, but they weren't. Okay, they were false. They were synagogue of Satan. They were serpents of vipers, as Christ said. So, someone else was looking, and it was the Magi, okay? So they maintained this understanding of the prophecy of the book of Daniel and said, okay, this is the time he's coming, and they were actually led by a star to the actual house to find the Messiah. By angels. Angels also instructed them what to do along the way. So even throughout all this time, they maintained this information of the prophecy, okay? They maintained this school, okay, started by Daniel the prophet. All right. And so what they saw Numbers chapter 24, Daniel 11, watching for certain things to happen. Now, those things would also happen and come to fruition in the latter days as well. So that there would be kings of the east. There would be things in Numbers 24 and Daniel 11 that will also show us Christ in his second coming. And interesting things in the prophecy like we share in this channel. For example, Cyrus is called Cyrus my anointed, Mashiach. Okay, so they identified the fact that they were situated in places where they were serving the king, serving at the highest level, but having these books of prophecy, watching for the Messiah. Okay, at least some of them. And they were right. They got it. Okay, they were right. These were devout men, as you could see before. All right, so they would identify that in the scriptures, certain things like Cyrus would relate to the Mashiach. Okay, so when you see certain things, 62 weeks, 7 weeks, unto Messiah, the prince or ruler, the Messiah. So they identified those in Christ's first coming to find the math to ascertain the actual year and time precisely when they could find him, when he was born and when they could find him by 2 years old. Okay, and then we would have all those same things happen in the latter days. Okay, all those same things will happen. All right, but these are hidden mysteries that many people will not know about, just like the people didn't know about the Magi and Christ's first coming. They didn't know who it was with these devout ones on Pentecost. Okay, but the Most High have set aside this school going back all the way to Daniel the prophet, all the way through. Okay, so yes, it is this Magi, it is this school, and it's this significance of the Persia, okay, Medes, Persia, and Elam that Christ will fulfill in his second coming to express his kingdom, the kingdom era, and the order of the of Christ fulfilling the second coming prophecies. Okay, so there you can see Elam, and now let's look at some of those prophecies. Okay. So remember how we saw Elam, we saw how that was specific on the day of Pentecost. We could see it there. And let's go to Jeremiah chapter 49. And this is the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against Elam in the beginning of the reign of Hezekiah, Zedekiah the king, saying, okay, so this is a prophecy against Elam. But there's something hidden in this coded, okay, which is a mystery. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the chief of her might. And upon Elam will I bring the four winds from the four ends of heaven. I will scatter towards those four winds. Now this is his throne, guys. And there shall be no nation wheresoever the outcasts of Elam shall not come. All right. Verse 38. I will set my throne in Elam. I will destroy from thence the king and the princes, says Yahweh. Okay, why would the Most High put his throne in Elam? All the prophecy says it's in Jerusalem. Well, the reason is it's a type, it's a shadow. So what this means, well, Elam means, yes, it was a physical place, but what does it refer to? It refers to the king in the book of Esther. Okay, it refers to Shushan the palace that we just explained to you. Where was Shushan the palace? In the province of Elam. So when he sets his throne in Elam, okay, it's the palace at Shushan. Okay, Shushan is our code word of the palace. It's the king's house. That is what this is talking about. His throne is in Jerusalem. It's not in Elam. But it's showing us that his throne will fulfill the prophecies of Elam. Okay, and this is the Son of Man coming in the clouds from the four winds. okay, gathering the outcasts of Elam. Okay, so then the prophecy is that the prophecy about Elam is just like you saw, the devout ones. That's the kings of the east, the devout ones, all right? They were in Jerusalem. They heard in their own tongue, okay, the mighty works of God. All right, so now let's continue with the prophecy of the kings of the east when he will gather, okay, the eklektos. He'll gather the elect, okay, and also the kings of the east. So in the kings of the east, all right, he shall set up. All right, let's go to Isaiah 11:11. And it'll come to pass in that day that Yahweh shall set his hand a second time to recover the remnant of his people, which were left from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, which is also Egypt, from Cush or Ethiopia, from Elam, from Shinar, which is Babylon, from Hamath, and from the islands of the sea. He shall set up the sign or standard of the nations. Okay, this is the Son of Man coming in the clouds, and you will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. But it's not the four corners. In Hebrew, the word corners is wings. So this is the order around the throne: lion, ox, man, eagle, east, west, south, north, four horns and four wings. Okay? He will gather them, all right? He will gather those outcasts, okay? Kings of the east are outcasts, all right? They're hated by the world, all right? So here you can see them and prophecies related to this assembling of them, all right? Now, they also are a symbol for war, all right? That's what you can see in Revelation is Armageddon, okay? And we can see them here in Isaiah 21, the burden of the sea. As the whirlwinds come from the south and pass through and come through the desert for a terrible land, a grievous vision is declared unto me. The treacherous dealer dealeth with treacherously, and the spoiler spoilers. Go up, Elam, okay, and besiege, O Media. Okay, so what Elam and Media is, it's a type that this is the destruction of Babylon. So the kings of the east is the order of the counselors around the throne to go to war to destroy Babylon. Go up, Elam. Go up, Media. All the sighing thereof shall cease. Therefore my loins are filled with pangs, as taketh hold of the pangs of a woman in travail. I am bowed down at the hearing. I am dismayed at the seeing. Okay? Verse 5. Prepare the table. Watch at the watchtower. Eat, drink. You princes, anoint the shield. Okay? Verse 9. Babylon is fallen in the graven images. Okay? Now who is this? Who is leading this? Who are the princes? They're in Elam. They're in Media. Okay? So this is Armageddon. This is the war and the destruction of Babylon. Next chapter, Isaiah 22. Okay? This is the army, guys. Verse 6. And Elam, bear the quiver, and the chariots, and the men, and the horsemen, and Ker. Okay? And it shall come to pass that your choicest valley will be full of chariots and horsemen. This is Armageddon. That shall set themselves in array at the gate. And he discovered the covering of Judah. Okay, in that day, the armor of the house of the forest. So what the armor of the house of the forest is, this is a place in the temple that they kept the armory. Okay, they kept the shields and they kept everything in the armory in the temple. Verse 9, I've also seen the breaches of the city of David, that they are many who are gathered together by the waters of the lower pool. All right, so what this means is these people go out in an order around the temple, or the same order. Okay, you can see it's Elam. Why is Elam in the armory, in the temple? Okay, it's because they have the key of the house of David, and they have the authorization from the king to go about Armageddon. Okay, to destroy. All right. That is exactly the role of the kings of the east in the end of days, the kings of Media. Now, I want to share with you a great mystery. So as we look at the kings of the east, we saw them as devout men. Okay, that word in Greek, if we take that word and we look at the Greek version of the Old Testament in the Septuagint, we can find that Greek word in Hebrew is Hasid. Okay, you may have heard the word like Jews using this expression, Hasidic rabbis, Hasidic Jews. Hasid is basically, when you read in English, the word saint. But it's not used as often as another word saint, which is Kodesh, which is holy. But basically, there's a word, Hasid, that is the devout ones that we saw in Acts chapter 2. Now, I'm going to show you a mystery in Micah chapter 7, where it talks about them. So first and foremost, this is definitely an end times prophecy in verse 1. Woe is me, for I am as they have gathered the summer fruits, as the grapelings in the vintage, and there is no cluster to eat. My soul desired the first ripe fruit in the King James, but that's first ripe figs. Okay? So this is the parable of the fig tree. Verse 2 says, the good man is perished out of the earth. Now this word in Hebrew for good man is hasid, saint. Okay, righteous man, holy one. So there is no hasid, there is no saint. It is perished from the earth. There is none upright among the men. They all lie in wait for blood. They hunt every man with his brother in a net. Okay, so here we have them discussing these saints. All right, and then when we get to verse 11, in that day the walls that shall be built, in that day the decree shall be far removed. Verse 12, and in that day shall come to you from Assyria, from the fortified cities, from the fortress to the river. Now some translations read like this, from Assyria to Egypt. Okay, from Egypt to the Euphrates, sea to sea, mountains to mountains. Okay, so here you have in verse 2, the Hasid, the righteous, and the promised land to Abraham. In that day shall come Assyria to Egypt, from Egypt to Euphrates. This is what we saw in Isaiah chapter 27, relating to his coming. When he looks, what we saw there, he's looking for the first ripe figs. We go to Isaiah chapter 27. We had discussed this before. This is the great trumpet. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall beat off from the channel of the river to the stream of Egypt, and they shall gather one by one, O children of Israel. But many translations, okay, say he reaches the way from the Euphrates River to the Egyptian boundary. This is the promise to Abraham. And it shall come to pass in that day a great trumpet shall be blown, and they shall come, which were ready to perish from the land of Assyria and outcasts of the land of Egypt, and shall worship Yahweh in the holy mount at Jerusalem. Now let's go to Jeremiah 51. In Jeremiah 51, we have, again, the scroll of Jeremiah that we talked about before, the Euphrates scroll, okay, that was in the Euphrates. The scroll was open, all right, that would be open in the end of days, and we would read the scroll, okay, the Euphrates scroll in our day, okay, of Babylon. That's Jeremiah 50 and 51. 51 verse 8, Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her, take a balm for her pain. All right. We will have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Forsake her. Let us go everyone into his own country. For her judgment reaches the heaven and is lifted up from the skies. So Yahweh brought forth our righteousness. Come, let us declare in Zion the work of Yahweh, our Elohim. Make bright the arrows, gather the shields. Yahweh has raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes against his device for Babylon, to destroy it, because of the vengeance of Yahweh and the vengeance of his temple. Set up the standard upon the walls of Babylon, make strong, set up the watchmen, prepare the ambushes, okay, against Babylon. This is the prophecy, guys, against Babylon. By who? The kings of the Medes, the kings of the East. That is what this is talking about. That's what's going to happen in the end of days. That's what the prophecy is alluding to. All right. Now, as we conclude We're going to read about him here in Psalm 48. Great is Yahweh, greatly to be praised in the city of our God, in the mountain of his holiness. Beautiful elevation. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion, on the sides of the north, in the city of the great king. God is known in her palaces for refuge. Verse 4. For lo, the kings were assembled, and they passed by together. They saw it, and they marveled, and were troubled, and hastened away. Fear took hold upon them like pain of a woman in travail. This is the kings of the east, right here in Psalm 148.
Come, Zion.